I could take you into that bathroom and nobody would even notice. This story takes place in late April of my freshman year of college. My school is situated in the western mountains of my state, and as the school year was coming to a close, I was focusing on packing up all of my belongings. At the time, I didn't have a place to park my car in town, and my parents' house was 3.5 hours away on the other side of the state, so my only option to get home was the Greyhound. I had acquired quite a lot of shit during the school year, sorority gifts, clothes, blah blah blah, and decided to go home for the weekend to take some of it early so that on move-out day, the rest would be easily fit into my mom's Honda Civic. The bus was usually a pretty sweet gig. With your student ID, it was $10 round trip, express, and I'd taken it a few times before, so I felt pretty comfortable. The only snafu was that the last stop for this particular bus was in Greensboro, but because I lived an hour and a half east from there, I'd always have to get a connecting bus to Durham, where my mom would pick me up. Well, Durham's pretty seedy. The bus to Durham was pretty seedy. I hated sitting around waiting for my mom, and she hated me waiting there. We decided that this time, she'd drive to Greensboro after work and pick me up. This is where the story really begins. The bus station was an add-on to a much older Amtrak station. I decided to sit in the train station side while I waited because it had this beautiful antebellum charm that spoke to my art student soul more than the sterile Greyhound terminal. Not to mention, there wasn't anyone else in there, which meant I had more room to spread out my bags and myself. It was about 3 p.m., and my mom wasn't going to be there for what could coincidentally turn into one of the longest hour of my life. I've been scrolling through Facebook on my phone when I noticed a form moving into my peripheral vision. I looked up and there was a man standing over me. "I'm sorry, what was that?" I pulled one of my earbuds out to look at him. I instantly felt uneasy. He was over 6 feet tall, easily 250 pounds, and something in his mannerisms wasn't quite right. I asked, "How you doing today, honey?" His mouth curled up in a small smile, but something in his eyes betrayed the innocence of the gesture. My eyes darted around, and I noticed that, aside from this man, I was still the only other person in the terminal. I smiled back hesitantly, and exchanged pleasantries with him, hoping that if I kept my answer short, he'd move along quickly. Quite the contrary, he sat down very close to me, like thigh to thigh close to me. He kept asking me questions about myself, which I felt obliged to answer out of politeness. Now, before I get an onslaught of comments telling me, "You should have told him to fuck off, you're not obligated to be nice to anyone," I would like to point out a few things. He was easily twice my size. Like most women, I was raised to be polite to everyone, and whether it was from drugs or mental instability, this man had a look in his eyes that said, "You are prey. You look like a good girl, are ya?" His comment had come out of the blue and made my stomach lurch. "Excuse me?" I squeaked out. His eyes were burning into me, his expression deadpan. "You a virgin?" My mouth felt dry. I felt incredibly embarrassed, uncomfortable, and couldn't quite find my words, so I nodded. His face relaxed like he was relieved, and that not quite smile settled back on his face. "I knew you were a good girl. Just had to ask because you're thick, you know? Men love thick women." His hand moved to my upper thigh and my heart was racing. "They do anything for a thick woman like you." I hate myself for it, but my innate reaction to literally everything is to laugh nervously, which she mistook for an invitation to keep making advances. I had contemplated just grabbing my bags and running for it, but where was I going to run to? The station was a ghost town, and to get to the Greyhound terminal, I'd have to walk through a poorly lit hallway where the bathrooms were, and I surmised he could easily just corner me there. I shifted in my seat, and his hand fell from my thigh. At this point, I heard a door open and saw another man walk in and sit facing me from the next aisle of pews. My eyes silently pleaded with him to help me, but he ignored me and said hi to the man next to me. They had a brief conversation before the intercom called for his bus and he left again. Fuck. "That's my boy Nate," he said with a smile. "I love him, and he's one of them guys I'm talking about. He'd do anything for a taste. Hell, you're so sweet. Even I could take you back into that bathroom and nobody would even notice." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I looked down when I felt my phone vibrate and my clammy palm. It was my roommate texting me. Abby's text was just a stupid screen cap meme, but it gave me an idea. I texted her back 2 words. "Call me." "That your boyfriend?" I looked over at him, surprised by the aggressive undertone of the question. In retrospect, I should have probably said yes, but I'd just gotten out of a really abusive relationship, and the thought of boyfriends disgusted me, so I deny it. "It's my mom. She's on her way to pick me up." "No boyfriend? You serious? I can't believe that," he said, shaking his head. "Can I get your number?" I scrambled to come up with an excuse. I weakly told him I don't give it out to people I don't know, but he ignored me. "I could check up on ya. Make sure you're being good and all." His eyes twinkled something sinister, and I could tell he was irritated at my reluctance. Abby had texted me back, asking why she needed to call, to which I replied, "Now." I denied his offer again, and before he could push the subject further, my phone rang. I jumped up immediately and emphatically answered. "Oh, hey, Mom. What's that? You're here? Uh-huh. Okay, I'll be out right away. No. Stay on the line in case I can't find you." Throughout my talking, Abby was on the other line, asking what the fuck I was going on about. "Oh yeah, Mom, the bus ride was fine. I'll tell you all about it when I get to the car." I emphasized the last part, and I think it'll finally register with her that something was wrong. I slung my duffel bag over my shoulder, and I will never forget what happened next. I went to grab the handle of my suitcase, and simultaneously the man's hand shot out and grabbed onto it first. I let my eyes slowly travel from his hand up to his face, and froze when our eyes locked. I've never seen so much evil in my life. Slowly he smiled again, and a natural force kind of smile, and said, "See you soon." I ripped the bag out of his hand and hightailed it the fuck out of there. I waited outside, out of view of the train station, and told Abby everything. My mom showed up shortly afterwards, and I all but jumped inside of the car. I tried to explain what had me so rattled, but she told me I was probably overthinking it and that he was probably homeless and mentally ill and didn't know any better. Typical mom. Regardless, I never took the bus home again. My peeping neighbor. I lived in Alberta, and when I first moved there, April 2008, until he moved 2010, we had a neighbor who was a bane to our existence. It all started when one day, I was taking the garage out to the bin. On my way back, I happened to look up and see, no word of a lie, 9 video cameras in this man's backyard. He had one above his back door, one on the railing of the back steps, one on a pole by the back steps, one on the receiver for his satellites, one on his back gate, and 3 on his fence, and 1 in an upstairs window. Now, the amount kinda creeped me out, but what really creeped me out was that 5 of the 9 cameras were pointed at my backyard. Oh, did I forget to mention that I have 3 young children? Well, I pointed this out to my husband, and we called the landlord right away, who called the cops, and they all went through this trouble and told him to remove the cameras that were facing my yard. Then the trouble really started. He killed 2 of my cats, threw a dead skunk in my backyard, yelled at my kids for playing, and threatened to kill one of my cats in front of my kids, then had the audacity to call the cops on my husband for yelling at him. Not long after, the cops came to our house and put a verbal peace bond on us. I was sleeping on the couch due to me having a broken arm. I turned off the light and settled in waiting for the Advil to kick in, when I looked at my living room window. And who should I see there? My creeper of a neighbor. I screamed and my husband came running downstairs. By this time, my neighbor had already ran back to his place. He finally moved out 2010 when he realized he couldn't get rid of us, and shortly after we had a fire in our townhouse and had to move into his old unit. We found out why he had all those cameras. We were moving stuff downstairs and saw he had built a room. He had a grow off for marijuana in his basement that no one knew about. I now live on an acreage outside of the city, and I'm so happy not to be there anymore. This was not the job description when I started. I have decided to share my story with you. This took place in March and April of 2009. I had just started working at Walmart in the hardware department. As a female, I knew little about hardware, but they didn't seem to care. I spent most of my time stocking, pointing customers to the right aisle or mixing paint. I rarely knew anything when it came to answering handyman work. Also note, I was about 23 at the time. I am 5, and at the time weighed about 110 pounds. It started the first Saturday I ever worked there. I had the early morning shift, starting at 7 a.m. It was pretty quiet and sleepy, and I had 0 customers for a good straight hour. I was also working with another coworker, Ron, who had started the same day as me. A man came in looking for a few different items. He was an Indian man, said he was from India at least, who was either in his late 30s or early 40s. He hovered over me, maybe around 6'3" or so, decently buff guy. He was also wearing a spring jacket with its collar turned up and a baseball cap. He completely bypassed Ron and went straight for me. I showed him to the products he was requesting when the questions started. I answered politely with a standard, "I'm not qualified to answer that. I can ask my coworker if he has any thoughts or ideas." He wouldn't let me, however. Instead, he dragged me to the furthest aisle in our department, far away from Ron. He started spouting off random stuff he was trying to do around his house, asking me what I thought might work best for his needs. I really had no idea, so I just pointed out random things because he didn't seem interested in having decent help. While I was talking, with my back to him looking at different products, that's when I felt him creep up behind me and grab my ass. In my mind, I tried to play it off as an accident, until he did it 2 more times, as well as brushed my chest at least 3 times. I kept inching away as best I could, while still trying to do my customer service thing. I was finally saved when Ron came up and asked if we could switch customers, because he had a customer who needed paint mixed. He wasn't taught how to do that yet. The man left about 2 seconds after that. I told Ron what had happened, and he agreed to keep an eye out for him. If he were to come back, Ron would help him out, but we didn't see him again that day. I worked the same shift the next day, but this time alone. The man came back. I spent an hour trying to dodge his hands. At one point, I was bending down to pick something up, and he snuck up in front of me. He had a boner going. I was obviously trying not to look at it, nor would I admit that I did, but he must have known I saw it, since his crotch is right in front of my face. "Do you like what you see?" he asked. I have to go get something from the stockroom," and I darted off. I took that time to talk to a manager about this man. I was clearly upset by him, and I figured the store had to value their employees somewhat. I must have talked to the wrong manager. I talked to my area's manager, Christina, and she basically told me to suck it up and deal with it. Customer satisfaction is our #1 goal. I didn't realize I had to satisfy them that way. I never saw him on the weekdays, but once Saturday rolled around, he was there again. I was with my supervisor, Matt, that day, but he had a meeting in the morning to attend, so I was basically alone in the department. The man dragged me to the tool aisle because he wanted a new hammer and nails so he could build a birdhouse. The grabbing and brushing started up again, and I must have looked clearly uncomfortable. Another male customer came up and asked me if everything was okay. My creeper darted out of the store quick. The other customer, who introduced himself as David, asked me what was going on. I was not comfortable telling him my story. I didn't know him, but he asked me if the creeper was harassing me during store hours, and I just gave a slight nod. David walked off, but about 10 minutes later he was back, trailed by 2 other people, my co-manager Eric and the head of AP, Bobby. David explained to the 2 what he witnessed, how wrong it was for Walmart to let this happen, and demanded they rectify the situation before I was hurt. Eric thanked David, and him and Bobby pulled me into the office. Eric did all the talking. "Is this true?" "Yes." "How long has it been going on?" "He started last Saturday and came back Sunday. I didn't see him again until today." "Why'd you tell anyone before? Why did a customer bring it to management's attention?" "I tried. I told Christina. She told me to get over it and help the guy no matter what." Neither of them looked happy at that. "Could you point him out on the security footage?" "Sure." So I went into AP room with them. We rewinded the tapes, and I pointed him out from that day. Only problem was, with the baseball cap and collar-up shirt, you could not see his face, and he purposely kept his head down to avoid being seen on the cameras. I described what he looked like to them, and Bobby said he would warn all his APs. I worked the next day again, Sunday. Our department kept getting phone calls, but every time someone answered, the caller would hang up. When I finally answered, it was the creeper. "Oh, good. You are there. I'm on my way. I'm taking you out to lunch. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, you sexy girl." I let out an eek and hung up the phone on him. However, I did call Eric and Bobby and let them know what was said. Both of them showed up in street clothes, as well as another AP guy. They stationed themselves in each of aisles and let me know the police were already called and on their way. About 5 minutes later, the creeper showed up. He literally ripped me away from another lady I was helping at the moment and tried dragging me to the exit in the tire center. Eric and Bobby tackled him to the ground, and the police were there about a minute later. He was arrested and banned from the store. From what I was told, he had outstayed his visa or something and being deported back to India. I never saw him again, and my nightmare was over. Don't take iPhones from strangers. I am an active user in many IRC chat rooms. In fact, at the moment, I'm in 54 chat rooms. The fact is, I'm younger and I've met a lot of really freaky people in chat rooms. However, I've never met someone as frightening as John. After signing up for a website in mid-April of 2012, I saw that someone was advertising their IRC chat room in a post on said website. I decided to give it a go. The first person to say hi to me was John. He recognized my nickname on the site and welcomed me warmly. At first I thought he was a completely normal human being. Oh, how wrong I was. After talking for less than a week, he found out my last name. I only knew this as he tried to friend me on Facebook. I'm not one to advertise myself online, so I went and chatted with him. How and why did you find out my real name? I just want to become best friends. This man is 22, I am 14. Being extremely creeped out by him finding out my name, I ignored the friend request and blocked him from Facebook. Trying to ignore how creepy it was, I continued talking to him. One day, he brought up a conversation about his dying iPhone. I told him how I fixed several iPhones of his model and offered some help. He got confused when I sent him a couple of links to parts to fix his phone, and he got confused. How about you just give me your phone number and I'll help you? I'm not exactly comfortable with that. How about I just explain it here? I'm just thinking of buying a used iPhone on eBay. How about you give me your address and I'll send you my current iPhone free of charge? This should have clued me as he was trying to find out everything about me. I shrugged it off as if he was just trying to be nice. Again, I was wrong. I was then talking to another kid my age on IRC, Tony, who had given John his address. John had sent him a letter with blood on it, very creepy, and is considered a biohazard. This is when I stopped talking to John. Somehow, he found my home chat room and my runaway chat room. He joined both and will not leave. In fact, I have talked to several other people from other IRC networks, and they all think he's a pedophile due to the way he acts. I found out recently, John has been arrested in 2009 for touching another person inappropriately. What I found out recently, John doesn't really know my address. He lied just to scare everyone. He has been threatened to be banned by 90% of the servers he idles on. Let's thank the cooperation of those servers and caring enough to think about the process of banning him, or else he'll just keep coming back over and over again.